Ian Eagle, you can hear me?
Yo, what's up, Max? How we doing, man?
How you doing? Welcome to the show, WSJU Radio, St. John's University. We have the one and only, as you know, from Nets games, football games, all the sporting events that you pretty much hear on TV, the one and only Ian Eagle. Ian, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Max. Good to be with you. Obviously, not everybody can see you right now, but I see what you're representing. I,
Yeah.
I get it. I understand. This is a good thing for New York basketball that you're wearing your Knick hat right now.
Yeah, I'm a diehard Knicks fan, but you got to be happy that the Nets are doing good.
Yeah, it's been fun. I think
Yeah.
more than anything else, I've been doing this 27 years with the Nets franchise. And even though they made it to back-to-back finals in the Jason Kidd years,
Yeah.
I've never felt the national relevance like I felt this year. Every single day, there seems to be buzz about this team, chatter, conversation, speculation. And that's a good thing.
Yep.
As we know in the NBA world, a lot of the the real meat and potatoes of the league is about the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not just about the game. So the Nets finally feel like they're a part of the conversation. They've obviously been on a great run, and they just play a really entertaining style of basketball.
Yep. James Harden's playing some of the greatest years in basketball for his career right now.
Yeah, Max, what struck me when they made the deal, we all have preconceived ideas and notions of what a player is based on our own experience of watching them. And with Harden, what we saw in Houston was someone who dominated the ball, scored because he had to, carried the team. And what was the persona? The persona was, well, you can't get over the hump with James Harden. He forces this deal, basically. That's the reality of the situation. Forces the deal to go to Brooklyn. And let me tell you, he has embraced every bit of it. His attitude has been off the charts, his positivity, and then his play on the court. Yeah. He's a facilitator. He's making his teammates better. He also has been more vocal and verbal than anybody anticipated. And I think it shows a couple of things. One, the stage of his career. He's already achieved all the personal accolades, scoring titles, all-star games, first team All-NBA, literally hundreds of millions of dollars that he's made playing the game of basketball. What's left for him? And that leads to number two, winning a championship. What separates these guys when you get to that elite level? It's not about the personal accomplishments anymore. It's what you've done on the biggest stage. And I think he recognizes the window of opportunity for him is now. And he's opened his arms up to whatever the team needs from him. And he's put together one of the best seasons of his career. And that's saying a lot for a guy that's going to the Hall of Fame.
Oh, for sure. And you definitely see that with how he's playing with the Nets right now. They're currently in the second place in the Eastern Conference right now. Do you see them moving up to the first spot and potentially going to the NBA championship this year, the finals?
Yeah, I think, Max, the priorities right now really aren't about seeding for them. When the smoke clears, if they're the number one seed and they have the best record in the East, so be it. But the way things are set up based on the pandemic, based on the fact that this is not a normal NBA season, yeah, I'm not sure how much the seeds are going to play a factor come playoff time. Now, maybe things change in our country and we are able to welcome crowds back into the stands. That brings a different point to the equation. But if it stays the way that it is with a minimal number of fans, does it matter if you're the 1 seed, the 2 seed, the 3 seed, the 6 seed, the 7 seed? It's really all about matchups at that point. The way I would view it is if you're a team in the Eastern Conference that has to play against the Nets, can you put a team on the floor that can beat the Nets, outscore them 4 times in a 7-game series? And that's really what it's going to come down to. The Nets are so gifted offensively. Defensively, we know there's still a lot of work to do, and it's something that they've made a focal point. Mm-hmm. But the offense, we're talking about historic levels potentially of what they can do. Things change in the playoffs. Defense clamps down. As we know, the officiating changes a bit. And I think the Nets believe that if you give them enough time to mesh, and that's all they have now in front of them is time. They still have about 36 games still to play, 38 games. So that's going to allow them to figure some things out, continue to work on their chemistry. And boy, I would be hard pressed to tell you, if healthy, and that's a big if, but if healthy, who would be a team that you would favor against them in the Eastern Conference right now?
None. I think the Nets are the front runners.
Yep. Agreed.
What's interesting is with the Knicks playing well this year, which is surprising. If you look back to the 1999 season, the Knicks were the 8th seed that year, and they ended up going to the finals.
It was a really likable Knicks team as well. You know, sometimes we just root for underdogs, and that team in particular had a little something that was Sprewell and Camby, and things just clicked at the right time. And let's remember, that was an odd season. That was a lockout shortened season. So all the things that you've come to understand in the NBA got turned upside down because the sample size was smaller, just like this year, 72 games compared to 82 games in a normal season. That was a 50-game season, if I remember correctly. And you didn't really know up from down come playoff time. An 8 seed, they had the huge win against Miami, and we know what happened after that as they rolled through the playoffs, came up short in the NBA championship series. But I really, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, growing up in Queens, I'm a Forest Hills guy. I grew up a huge sports fan. I really want to get to a point where both the Nets and Knicks are among the upper echelon teams in the NBA. To me, that's what's going to bring the spirit of basketball in our city back to where it should be. And we're starting to see signs of it because the Knicks have really been a nice surprise. And Tom Thibodeau has done a fantastic job. To me, he is a top level coach. It was just a matter of finding the right fit for him for his next chapter. And he loves a good challenge. He's taken it on. They've taken to his coaching. They play defense. They play exceptionally hard. And it's a really good story right now in the NBA that the Knicks are back to a credible level. And maybe they make a playoff run, and who knows, in one of these strange, obscure seasons, maybe they even pull off an upset.
I would love to see that, being a Knicks fan. The last time I've seen them in the playoffs when I was in 8th grade, that's going back to 2013.
Max, that really blows my mind. In all honesty, growing up in New York, the Knicks were mediocre for a stretch during my youth. I was a little too young to appreciate the 2 championships. I was born in 1969, so obviously they win in 70, they win in 73. I have no idea what's going on at that point. But then there was a little bit of a bump with Bernard King, and he captured the imagination of New York City. Then a lull again. Pat Riley comes in, and the Knicks are at the top of the food chain, and they're vying for championships. Never quite got there. We know, of course, what happened with the Knicks and the Houston Rockets. But if you're a certain age right now, I'm not talking about your age. I'm talking about like 13, 14 years old. You have no idea what it's like to have a consistently good basketball team as a New York Knicks fan. That blows my mind. That just shows you how long it's been, other than the 1 year with Carmelo Anthony and that one team that had a nice run going to the second round of the playoffs. That's it. So it's time. It's time this team and this franchise gets back to a level of respectability around the NBA.
And speaking of a team of respectability, the Jets, I want to see them get back to that level again, as what you call their games too. And what a dreadful season they had. I'm glad Gaze is gone. I'd love to have your take on what the Jets should do at quarterback. Do you see untapped potential in Sam Darnold? Should they take a quarterback in this year's draft with Zach Wilson or Justin Fields, or trade the house with the first round draft picks and get Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, that feels like we're on an edition of Let's Make a Deal. What's behind door number 1? What's behind door number 2? What's behind door number 3? You've got these options in front of you, and whatever option you take is going to probably dictate the next 5 to 7 years of your organization and the success or failure. Let's start with option A, keeping Sam Darnold. Look, there have been flashes. Anyone that's watched Jets games the last 3 years, you've seen moments where you think, wow, this guy has a chance to be a legitimate quarterback. He just has not been able to sustain it. He has not had a very good supporting cast. Offensive line, in fact, the last couple of years, very shaky. Skill position players this past season in particular, among the bottom 3 in the NFL. So is it fair to gauge and to judge Sam Darnold on these 3 years? He's still ridiculously young.
Yeah.
But you're also talking about a player that has no ties to the current coaching staff and the current GM. He didn't draft him. His coach didn't choose him. So that's why I think you have to start looking at option 2 and option 3. Yeah. Option 2 being drafting a quarterback at number 2. If you believe in Zach Wilson's talent, if you believe this is your guy, then you have to make that pick and you have to find a suitor for Sam Darnold and accept the 4th round pick or whatever it might be. You have to just accept that you're not going to get market value. If you're not sold on that QB, and option 3 is a legitimate option for Deshaun Watson, who's a proven commodity, now you get into some very shaky terrain, because in order to get the services of Deshaun Watson and make a deal with Houston, a team that would be making a move that will change their organization and they will get ripped, as we know, within NFL circles, you're going to have to give up a lot. Okay. And now you question whether or not you have enough to surround Deshaun Watson with the kind of team that you can go to battle with. So we just laid them all out.
Yeah.
You're asking me what's the best option? Personally, I still believe Sam Darnold has something. I do. But I think option 2 is probably where they're leaning based on the fact that there is no connection. Joe Douglas did not make this pick, and this decision is going to basically dictate how we view him as a decision maker in the NFL. So with that said, I personally believe they go option 2.
It's going to be interesting to see. There's so many storylines that you see in the newspapers and all around the media world and sports, what the Jets will do. I think I'm ready for a new quarterback. I'm ready to move on and see what they can do with Zach Wilson. I really see something in that kid at BYU.
I admittedly, because I live in the NFL, do not consume college football at that level. Once they get to the NFL, I'm all in. I learn everything I need to know about these players to prepare for games on Sundays, and I do radios on Thursdays, so I'm often doing 2 games a week. So I'm inundated once they get to the league. But I'm not a draft guy. I'm not someone that spends an inordinate amount of time preparing for the draft. I'm in my NBA season, my college basketball season, once I finish with the NFL, and that's where a lot of my focus is. I've seen highlights. I've seen what he's capable of. We all know that if you put together the best plays from any collegiate quarterback worth his weight in salt, you're going to see something of value.
Yeah.
But we also know that this is an inexact science and there's so much more to it. That's why the interview process is so important, trying to get to know the person, trying to get to know the personality, the leadership abilities, the intangibles. There are certain things that you can't see on tape. And there's part of the big picture, which is heart, desire, work ethic. You never really find out about a player until you get them in your system. And that's why we see so many busts.
Yeah.
That's why it happens so often in the NFL, probably more than any other sport. I don't count baseball. You're drafting high school kids. You just have no idea what eventually they're going to turn into. You're drafting adults for the most part in the NFL, 21, 22-year-olds, and you still don't quite know how it's going to translate at that next level because the physical nature of it, the mental part of playing quarterback in the NFL, just because you can sling it, just because you're a big kid, just because you're agile, it doesn't mean that much if you can't dissect a defense, if you can't make the correct reads, if you can't lead your team, if you can't process information. So all of those things, and we're just scratching the surface when we talk about what it takes to play in the NFL at that position. And that's why these general managers make as much money as they do. They have the responsibility for making those picks, and you got to live and die with those picks. Yeah. That's on your permanent record forever. And these GMs know that when you're picking that high, you can't swing and miss.
Yeah. You got to get them right every time. It's something that I've been surprised in hearing in the recent months. Was Miami interested in Deshaun Watson? Because you have Tua Tagovailoa. I'm a huge fan of his. Did great at Alabama.
Yeah, I had a couple of Miami games this year. Impressed with Tua. Listen, all of our interviews were done via Zoom. We never got to meet anybody in person this year based on all the protocols. And that's been the case NFL, NBA, that you're never one-on-one with a player or a coach. They're in a different zone from you. So I don't have that one-on-one contact with Tua. I have Zoom calls. We did a couple of them, and I was impressed. Carries himself well, certainly likable. You see certain aspects to his game that could really start to resonate in the NFL, but they didn't see a lot of big plays downfield. I think that might be the concern with Tua, whether or not he can eventually get to that point. You still, in this league, have to have explosive plays. Dinking and dunking can only get you so far, and running for 6 yards as a quarterback can only get you so far. That's the one area of concern that I sense from the Miami Dolphins, whether or not he can really develop that downfield passing game. It's 1 year, so it's completely unfair to make a statement and say, this is it. This is the stamp. But it is an area that they are certainly focusing in on to see improvement and evolution in year 2 and year 3 and year 4.
It was such a shame to see them not go to the playoffs and lose to the Bills, because Tua brings him in. He's 7-2 as a starter. You see Fitzpatrick make that incredible throw downfield and completion when with the helmet, when the guy pulled his helmet on the defense for the Raiders. That was an insane throw. A game that I remember that you called. I remember in the 2015 season when the Jets had Fitzpatrick, being a Jets fan. I remember he opened up the game in London against Miami with a 50-yard pass to Brandon Marshall.
You're 100% right. I do remember that. And it was Ryan Fitzpatrick and Ryan Tannehill. And I had just come off the flight trying to adjust to the London time.
The time zone.
The time zone, and it screws with you. There's no doubt about it. And I'm not one to make mistakes very often on the air. There were a couple of times where my brain was saying Ryan Fitzpatrick and my mouth was somehow saying Ryan Tannehill in that game. I do remember that vividly. Ryan Fitzpatrick just has a knack. He's just got that other extra intangible that you're not going to see on a stat sheet. You may not even see it necessarily reveal itself every week when you watch the games, but there is a belief that he brings and that his teammates cling on to. And that's what has served him so well for so many different teams. Look, he's not going to go down as one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. He's not going to go down as one of the best winners in NFL history. This guy just has gotten every ounce of ability out of his body and left it on the field every week. I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great dude as well. He's just a great guy to talk to, whip smart and family guy, many, many children, prodigious beard, the whole 9 yards. So I'm a fan. I just like the guy personally a lot, and I respect. That's exactly what I'm talking about at the quarterback position. You know, he was a low draft pick. He got a flyer with the Rams. He was forced into action because of injury 1 week. He throws for 300 plus yards, and then boom, he's got an NFL career. He could have easily been a 1 or 2 year and done kind of guy, but his will would not allow that to be.
Yeah, you've seen him all throughout the years in Buffalo, and you saw him with the Jets. You saw him what he's done for Miami, and even when he was with the Buccaneers. He did
Rams,
so well.
Houston,
Rams,
Cincinnati, Tennessee. We can just keep going over and over and over again. This year in particular just solidified and validated the Fitzmagic moniker because he really does have some kind of magic that goes along with how he approaches the game. I don't know where he ends up I don't know if he stays in Miami. I don't know if another team takes a flyer on him to be a backup or to help a young guy. Talking to Tua, he went out of his way to make sure we understood what Ryan Fitzpatrick meant to him in not just the advice, but learning by observing him.
Yeah.
By how he carried himself, how he treated his teammates, how his voice carried in the locker room. That's a really big part of this that sometimes goes unsaid because we don't see it. Yeah. We're not privy to it. So when a player goes out of his way to make sure the network broadcasters know the kind of commitment level and impact that an older player had, you take notice.
It's time to get into your background. I want to know what it was like going to Syracuse University. Well, fun fact about me is that I grew up a Syracuse fan, even though I attend St. John's. I was a big fan the year they went to the Final Four, 2017, when they had Michael Benajay and Malachi Richardson. What an amazing year. And it's a shame that they couldn't pull it out and go to the championship and win. But what was the decision for you to go to Syracuse, being from Queens, and your experience at WAER?
Yeah, Max, it was pretty straightforward. I heard as a kid that Syracuse was the top sports journalism program in the country. Mm-hmm. So that's what I fixated on. And I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do this. I was 8 years old. We hear these stories and sometimes they sound cliche and you think, is that possible? I'm telling you, that was when I knew what I wanted to do. I told my parents that that's what I wanted to do at that age. And they both told me, well, that's what you'll do. So when you hear that as a kid, it's incredibly empowering because what doesn't seem attainable in your head has now been somehow validated by your parents that, no, you can do that. They believe in you. I didn't do anything about it. There was no high school radio station other than fictitious games with baseball cards or playing 3-on-3 with my friends, which could be annoying if you're doing play-by-play and you're playing basketball against your friends. At some point, they're like, hey, shut up. We get it. We understand. You want to be an announcer. So I just knew that Syracuse is where I wanted to be. And I applied there, got accepted, and hit the ground running. When I got there, I got involved in college radio stations right away. Got involved with college television. I was interning at a local TV station. Mike Tirico was the anchor at the CBS affiliate.
Yeah, he's also a Syracuse alum.
Syracuse guy. So I meet Mike Tirico on the sideline of a high school football game right at the beginning of my sophomore year of college. Where's he from? Queens, Bayside. So we hit it off. Within a minute, we're talking the same language. We have so much in common. And he eventually invites me to intern for him at his television station. Can't tell you how invaluable an experience that was for him to watch, for him and me, for me especially. And I think he would tell you for him that I was a young guy, I was eager, I was motivated, and I really wanted to do right by him and make sure that I did good quality work for him. And that's what I did for 3 years, working alongside him and learning a ton. So in many ways, when I look back on it, there's no doubt in my mind, I would not be where I am today if not for the experiences at Syracuse University.
Would you say that their programs there for radio are strict? Because when I got to WSJ Radio St. John's University, I'm going to say it like it was a hellhole. It was it was so bad because all of our past GMs never took it seriously because it's student run. Is Syracuse student run?
There's one radio station, WJPZ, all students, every department, every job. WAER, the other station that you alluded to, the sports staff is completely student run, but it is a professional station with a GM, with a news director, so on and so forth, program director. And that blend was really important looking back on it. So I started at WJPZ, and a lot of it was probably similar to your experience of get on the air and make something of it. And if you come in with the right standard and quality level, then it will reflect itself in the on-air product. And there were some other students that screwed around and didn't care, and others that took it seriously.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So then I go over to WAER, and there was a clear plan in place. There was a history, and there was a certain excellence that was expected. And there was also a caste system. You really had to wait your turn. So a freshman couldn't get on the air right away. A sophomore couldn't do play-by-play at WAER. That was left for the seniors and a few juniors. You had to work your way up. And the payoff was you got to do these games inside the Carrier Dome, men's basketball, football, lacrosse. And that was the goal. So when I got there and I got a sense of what the environment was like and what the process was going to be, it made you work hard. The competitive nature of it, you were pitted against your fellow students, and you were there collaboratively, but you were also there trying to carve out a niche for yourself, which gave you a pretty good idea of what it was going to be like post-graduation. So to me, that was a positive, that it was competitive, that you weren't handed anything, that you weren't left to do it just on your own, go figure it out. It was a lot of teamwork, and to get to that final stage of doing games on what we all dreamed of, the Carrier Dome floor or the press box at the Carrier Dome, it took a lot of dedication, work, time, effort, all of those things that you need to have in everyday life after you graduate.
I'm happy to hear about that experience that you have and that you learned in college radio. And that's something I'm trying to implement into my station, because I'm really the first general manager that's taken the station seriously in years. Like I said before, when I went there, no one took it seriously. I made sure the sports department was always great. It was amazingly run to where the point they could broadcast games, but the infrastructure, the station programming, secretary, all the other positions, there were no shows. People weren't doing shows on the station. So I took my opportunity to do whatever I could to provide content for the station and the university and make the most of my time there. And thank God for that station, because I'm able to do what I do. And I made it strict. I make it a point to our members right now. Mike Francesa went to St. John's University. This is the god of sports radio.
Yeah, you're right. Look, I worked with Mike and the Mad Dog behind the scenes for one full year, 1992. And it was an incredible learning experience for me to be not just a fly on the wall. I was heavily involved in the show. It was Mike, it was Chris, it was Bob Gelb behind the scenes, and it was me. And for 1 year, I had the best seat in the house, and I really got to see how the sausage was made and the chemistry that they developed and how gifted those two were as communicators and talk show hosts and how innovative they were. And just one point on your current situation, the way I would view it, Max, is pretty simple. You will leave a legacy behind, and somebody is paying attention, and somebody will see the standard in which you've operated at. And the hope is that they will bring the same mentality. If it's someone that's 2 years younger than you and is noticing this is the way it's supposed to be done, I think that's why WAER has been so successful. It's been passed down from year to year to year. And part of it is you don't want to let down your predecessors. Marv Albert worked at WAER. Dick Stockton worked at WAER. Len Berman worked at WAER. Sean McDonough, on and on and on. And you never want to be part of the class that didn't maintain the level. And I think that's eventually what has to happen at your station as well. There has to be pride.
Yeah.
And that pride is born from seeing others that bring a certain pride to the job.
You hit the nail right on the head. It's important to set that example. And I think you're right. I think I'm going to leave a legacy behind, and people can follow that and make St. John's Radio mentioned more and highly respected, because that station it's done wonders for my career. It really has. It's given me a lot of experience. And if it wasn't for the station, I don't think I'd be talking to you here tonight.
There you go. Exactly.
Oh, what would you say that you learned? Because you mentioned before that you were at the Fan, and I read up on the history with your experience there. What would you say that what did you learn at your time at Syracuse University, WAER, and the Fan that helped you craft your professional career in play-by-play?
Well, I interned at WFAN in between my junior and senior year of college. So it was the summer of 1989. And that's really when the station started to find its footing in New York and started to make an imprint in the market. Station started in 1987. It took a little while for people to warm to it. They opened with a really poor philosophy. They went with more national broadcasters as opposed to New York centric. And it took about a year and a half for them to figure that part out. So by 88, 89, they finally had a roster that sounded and felt like New York. So I step in during that time as things were on the rise. And what really stuck with me, Max, when I went back to Syracuse for my senior year, this is pre-internet. This is before you could just type something in on your computer, Google it, and watch a video and get a behind the scenes look at what life was really like. It was really up to your imagination at that point. So when I returned from my senior year of college, I felt like I had insight that nobody else had. I had seen the inner workings of the station. I had been in the control room. I had worked the newsroom. I had been in the studio. I had seen the update anchors preparing for their updates. I had seen the talk show host going through their items that were going to be part of the show in the newsroom before they actually went on the air. And it gave me this edge, at least I thought, going back to Syracuse. I just had this knowledge that others didn't have. And it fueled me with confidence more than anything else. So when I showed up for my senior year at Syracuse, I didn't say anything. I didn't talk about it. I didn't share it with the others and tell them, hey, I was at FAN. I just know things now. I just kept it to myself. But there was a quiet conviction that I now had. And it really allowed me to attack my senior year with an authority and a confidence. And it made me a better broadcaster. I just felt like a more confident broadcaster. So when I took the job, I got a call in February of my senior year. And I'll be honest with you, I had gone out drinking the night before. It was a late night. I'm sleeping late the next morning. The phone rings at 9 a.m. I am not prepared for whoever's going to be on the other end of that call. But it was someone from WFAN. Her name was Carrie Loberfeld. And I pick up the phone. Hello? She's like, Ian? I'm like, yeah. It's Carrie Loberfeld, WFAN. I'm like, oh, hey, how you doing? And she said, hey, we want to interview you for a job opening at WFAN. Are you interested? And I said, through the cobwebs, yeah, that'd be great. So I go up. It was during spring break of my senior year. I go up to New York. I stay in the house I grew up in Forest Hills. I go for the interview at WFAN, and I'm told a couple of things. One, it's a producer job. I want to be on the air. It's a producer job. And I'm told very strictly, if you want to be on the air, do not interview for this job. I think to myself, well, what's the worst case? Interview for the job, see what happens. Two, I'm told they have two other people that are already in-house. One of them is probably going to get the job. So don't go in with any expectations whatsoever. Yeah. Okay. When you're told that, at that point, in my mind, I had nothing to lose whatsoever going into the interview. I meet with the program director, a guy by the name of Mark Mason, great guy. We sit down. Within 2 minutes, I feel a connection with him. He's laughing at my jokes. He's interested in what I have to say. I'm asking good follow-up questions. We have a really good conversation going. It's flowing. I'm in there for half an hour with him.
Wow.
At the end of the interview, he says, and I don't know if he's joking, serious. He says, well, when can you start? I said, well, I graduate May 11th. I could start May 13th. And he laughs and he stands up and shakes my hand, puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "It was great meeting you. We'll be in touch." So I walk out of the interview. I stop by the bullpen area where a guy that I know is sitting there, Eric Spitz, who now works at Sirius XM Radio, a great friend of mine. And I had met him during my internship. He was the producer on duty 7 to midnight. He says, "How'd it go?" I said, "I think it went really well." He's like, "I don't think you're necessarily getting this job, but great for you if you think that." He goes, "I'll call you in a few days." I go home to my dad's house. I start packing my car to drive back to Syracuse. And my father comes outside of the driveway. He says, "Hey, you have a phone call." I said, "Who is it?" He says, "It's Eric Spitz." So I pick up the phone. I had just seen him 45 minutes earlier. I go, "What's up?" He goes, "What the hell did you say to Mark Mason?" And now I don't know. I'm like, "Is it bad? Is it good?" I go, I don't know. What? He goes, "He wants to hire you." And that was it.
Wow.
They hired me. They held the job for me. And I had a decision to make because I had a couple of on-air offers, one in West Virginia and one in Buffalo. And I made the decision to take the producer job in New York because in my mind, I thought to myself, the station I want to be at is WFAN radio. If I go to Buffalo, if I go to West Virginia, if I go and get experience on the air, there's no guarantee I'm going to get back to WFAN radio.
Yeah.
I have a chance to get to the radio station I want to be at, albeit not in the role that I want. But that was enough incentive for me to take the job and decide I'm going to just try to work my way up. And how can you possibly put yourself in a position to move up unless you are in the environment that you want to be in? So to me, I almost looked at it, Max, as graduate school in many ways. I just viewed it as this will be an extension of what I was doing at Syracuse. I'm just going to, by osmosis, learn a ton, and I'm going to be a sponge. And it took about 1 year and 4 months to get on the air. They offered me an update shift. Somebody was sick on a football Sunday. I took the shift. I did well. I got offered the shift the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week. And then by the Super Bowl of the 91 season, 1992 Super Bowl, I hosted my first show. Steve Levy and I did a 5-hour pregame show leading up to Buffalo and Washington. And that's really where it all started. And it was based on me instinctually believing that if I put myself in that situation, that I'm going to do my best to work my way up and get an opportunity.
And you did. You had your show on the air. You eventually were able to call play-by-play for the Jets games.
Yeah. So in 1993, WFAN made a major commitment. They acquired the rights to the New York Jets. And Mark Mason, the gentleman that interviewed me and was the program director, and eventually the guy that put me on the air and believed in me and gave me my shot, he ended up moving on. He was replaced by Mark Chernoff. Mark,
guy there now. Yeah.
He's there now. Fortunately, probably one of the biggest phone calls of my life. Eric Spitz, who I mentioned earlier, was moving up the ladder at WFAN. And when Chernoff came in, he leaned on Eric and Steve Cohen, who's also at Sirius XM now. He leaned on both of them to get a sense of the radio station, how it operates, who are the keepers, who may not be long for their respective jobs. And he wanted to form his own opinion. And one of the biggest phone calls that I remember in my life was Eric Spitz calling me and saying, "Hey, look, I just want to let you know, I talked to Mark Chernoff today," and there's a pause. And he said, "He's a big fan of your work." And at that point, it was just a collective sigh of relief because your career can go one way or the other. All it takes is one person. I didn't know Mark Chernoff. I had never met him in my life. He was a listener. He was coming from FM radio. And if he says to Eric Spitz, "I don't really like his style," that's it. You're done. Fortunately, he did. He gave me a chance. I actually added more roles when he came to the radio station. And when they got the rights to the Jets, he named me the pre and post game host. And that was really the first time that I had something to myself, something to call my own. And it proved to be a really important step in my career. Eventually, I got the job calling Jets games. That was Mark Chernoff, who again believed in me, believed in my abilities. I had gotten the Nets play-by-play job a few years prior. So I think that made the decision a little easier. When I was succeeding on the play-by-play side, I added football to my responsibilities. And now I was juggling the NBA, the NFL, enter college basketball with CBS. And all of a sudden I've got a bunch of balls in the air, and it was all about keeping them in the air and not dropping any of them.
Yep. What's interesting is how you got hooked up with the Yes Network. And I believe that I read online that you had to split the games with the Nets with Marv Albert.
Yeah. So how it worked out, Max, the Yes Network came in. I was doing the games for Sports Channel and then Fox Sports New York. Yes Network acquired the rights. And the first 3 years of the Yes Network, I was the main guy. The fourth year, they brought Marv Albert in. We were splitting the games. That lasted for about 3 seasons. And then it flipped, and I was doing the majority of the games. Marv would do a small number, maybe 15 or 20. And then after a couple of years, Marv moved on and focused all of his attention on TNT. And I was back as the main voice. So it's now been 27 years of doing Nets games. So from 1994, I got the radio job. The next year, I got the television job. And I can't even wrap my brain around the fact that over half of my life has been spent with this franchise. I just turned 52 years old, and 27 of those 52 years I've been associated with the Nets. It's mind blowing for me to think of it in those terms. I was always the young guy, always. Every step along the way, I was the young guy in the NBA. I was the young guy in the NFL. I was the young guy at CBS. I was the young guy at Yes. And now all of a sudden the numbers switch on you, and I've accumulated some substantial years on the resume.
That's amazing, just hearing your story and how long you've been with the Nets. Did you ever get the chance to call Nets games when Petrovic played there?
No, I missed him by 2 seasons. I started in 94. Okay. He passed away in 93.
That's right. That's a shame. You look back at his career, he was going to be a dangerous player.
Oh, yeah. He had already proven himself as a legitimate player in the league. I think if you really look at it, in Portland, he felt he didn't get a chance. He didn't feel like the Blazers truly believed in him. The best thing to ever happen is that Willis Reed believed in him and traded for him. And it changed his life. It changed his career. It proved that he could play at that level. That was still when there was a lot of skepticism about European players, whether or not they could handle the physical rigors of playing in the NBA. And he was among the first guys that you started to believe that this was becoming a true global game. He had a real competitive streak to him. And I certainly know a lot of people that were affiliated with the Nets that knew him and knew him well. And they just said he was a terrific guy, fun-loving, competitive as hell, and a really gifted shooter. His life and his career were cut way too short.
Yeah, it's a shame. And it reminds me of just when we talk about the story of his accident, Tiger Woods yesterday. That was really bad. And thank God that he survived, because I had flashbacks of Kobe when that happened yesterday.
Yeah, Max, it's interesting when you get transcendent figures. I'm talking about Jordan and Ali, and LeBron is now entering that pantheon. Kobe certainly in that mix. Tiger. It's no longer just a sports story. There's a reason why every network stopped their programming in the middle of the day to cut in with an update. Yeah. This is a larger than life figure. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch the documentary yet on HBO. If you haven't, definitely circle it and check it out. Two-part series on Tiger, gives you a incredible insight into his life, his upbringing, his story, his demons, and his imperfections. So fortunately, this was not tragedy. He lived, and I know people are speculating about his future as a golfer. Right now, to me, that's not the priority.
Thank you. You're the only one that said that. Everyone all over the news networks and even coworkers have even said that. When can he get back out on the course? How about his family? How about he recovers? What do you care about him getting back on the golf course?
Yeah, I think we get a distorted view sometimes because, again, it's this larger than life figure. So you go through a mental checklist of, okay, is he okay? When can he play? Well, whoa, time out. When can he hug his daughter?
Yeah.
When can he go out on the course and just have fun with his son? When can he walk his daughter down the aisle? When can he go to graduation? Like, let's not forget about those moments of life. Because we put him on a pedestal doesn't mean that the everyday experiences that we all want in our life isn't something that he also wants. So I know it's been an abnormal life. He's made more money than any human being could ever even possibly dream of. But that doesn't solve all your problems. No. He clearly has other problems. And it sounds like this truly was an accident. He was going too fast. And it's funny, I talked to a couple of people that know that area well yesterday. My producer on Nets games, Frank DeGrace, one of the best producers in the NBA, he told me that he attended a couple of seminars at that hotel and resort that the Tiger was staying at. And he specifically remembers leaving in a rental car back to the airport early in the morning, and this winding road that if you misjudged it with fog, usually a part of the mix early in the morning, it could be drastic. So for someone to mention that out of the blue tells you that these were extenuating circumstances. It doesn't look like, hopefully, there was anything untoward other than he was going too fast or he was late for his appointment, whatever it might have been. And obviously, there's been a lot of idle speculation. But first and foremost, let's hope he's okay. Let's hope he can get his life in order, and then we'll worry about the other stuff down the road. Yeah, his life has to get back together and recover, and let's see if he can walk before we start talking about him playing a round of golf again. Agreed. Getting into the Syracuse basketball team right now, you got to be impressed. Yeah, up and down. It's funny. When I was there, it was really the heyday. My freshman year, they go to the NCAA championship game. They lose to Indiana on a Keith Smart jump shot. And it was a crusher, like really a body blow. Anyone that was going to school at that time, considered themselves a Syracuse fan, you thought you were never going to get over it. You were never going to get past it. Eventually, they win the championship with Carmelo Anthony, and that exorcised a lot of the demons for Syracuse. And since that point, they've had some good runs here and there, but they're not recruiting at the level that they were recruiting at. They're not necessarily getting blue chippers. And for Coach Boeheim, every year has been a little bit of an adventure. He is a fantastic coach. He's done and seen everything possible at that position with Syracuse. I wonder where this team fits in. I don't know if they're going to make the tournament. Right now, they're not. They're on the outside looking in. There is some good individual talent, but collectively, they just haven't been able to find real consistency. And this year is just so strange. It just is. There's no getting around it. I've done some college basketball games. I was in Knoxville this past weekend. I did Kentucky, Tennessee, so I traveled for that one. I've done most of my games from a remote location in Clifton, New Jersey, calling it off a monitor. And that's odd and very different. I don't know how this tournament is going to look. Gonzaga to me and Baylor have looked like the two best teams, but I've seen good performances from Oklahoma State, and I've seen other teams step forward. Yeah. I think it's going to be a wacky NCAA tournament. I just don't think that you can go with chalk in the bracket. There's going to be some unique results just based on the fact that we have no idea how these college kids are going to react when they're put in that position in a quasi bubble.
Syracuse currently stands at 13-7. I think their upcoming game is Georgia Tech. Let's see how they play in that game. I think they should do well. I think they will. St. John's had a rough game last night against Villanova.
I'm sensing though, Max, you still have a little bit of an affinity for Syracuse. It's still in there somewhere. I know you're a St. John's guy. Yeah. I get it. That's your school. That's who you represent. But somewhere back there, and maybe the fact that they're not in the Big East, you can justify that's your ACC team.
Yeah,
I'm cool with that.
Could. You're exactly right. I'm for New York teams, so I want to see New York teams win. I haven't seen any of my teams win ever in my life. As a Jet, Met, Knicks, St. John, and Syracuse won in my life, but I was too young to remember.
Yeah.
And Rangers, you could throw in the Rangers too.
Being a fan, as we know, is not the easiest of roads based on the team that you choose. And I would tell you that the way you have to view it is the payoff is going to be sweeter. That's the way you got to look at it. The buildup and the release when one of your teams finally gets it done. Yeah. You're just going to feel complete ecstasy and joy. You go around the country and, different fan bases handle themselves in different ways. I have a very unique perspective based on the fact that I do local games for the Nets and have done it for so long. And I've now been doing network games for 23 years, and you have to wear a different hat. It's not the same exact presentation in your approach. Yeah. And what I root for, people ask me all the time, do you have a favorite team? You know what I'm a fan of? I'm a fan of close games. I'm a fan of dramatic finishes. I'm a fan of well-played sporting events with good storylines and personalities. Yeah. I'm a fan of personalities. There's certainly coaches that I've talked to over the years in the NFL that you really admire and respect. And when they win, it's just natural that you think, hey, that guy or that woman deserves it. I think for me, it was a learning process pretty early on when I got the network job. That's not to say I'm not a fan anymore. Of course, you're always going to be a fan of some sort, but I have separated myself from that part of my personality, and I don't really allow it to come out all that often. Occasionally in the privacy of my own home, but that's really about it. For the most part, I'm about preparing for the games, getting myself to a point where I can inform and entertain the audience, and truly being engaged in the event that I'm covering. When I put the headset on, I'm all in. My concentration level is heightened, and I'm locked into what I'm doing. And who wins and how they won and all of those things, I'm just there as a conduit to try to convey the drama of the event. That's how I view it.
And that's what you do. What is the best way to build chemistry with your partner when you're doing play-by-play?
Yeah, I've really taken it upon myself early in my career to understand that part of the job is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And I think going back to the Mike and the Mad Dog days, it taught me a lot. It taught me that even on days when there wasn't that much happening in the world of sports, Mike and Chris could produce an excellent show, and a show that I would want to listen to, even if it wasn't during the World Series or Super Bowl week or the NBA Finals or the Stanley Cup playoffs. Just a random day, they still could deliver. And that planted a seed in me in that two-man dynamic, that you've got to find some commonality. At that point in their relationship, they actually were very friendly and very close, and it deteriorated through the years. Yeah. But even when they weren't friendly, they still did excellent shows together. And that also showed me something. You don't have to be best friends with your analyst. It helps.
Yeah.
If you have commonality, it certainly reveals itself on the air, but you've got to find something. And the way I've tried to view it is, I'm going to take what the analyst brings to the table and I'm going to spotlight it. Not every analyst I work with is going to have a comedic touch. Not every analyst that I work with is going to be analytical. Not every analyst that I work with is going to break down the X's and O's to perfection. Not every analyst that I work with is going to understand the ins and outs of television or radio, but they're going to have one of those attributes. And whatever attribute it is that's their best quality, I'm going to showcase it. I'm going to figure out a way to make sure that comes to the forefront. And whatever attribute they're struggling with, I'm going to compensate. I'm going to find a way to balance it and take some of the pressure off them. So once I started with that lens, it changed my whole perspective. Another seminal moment for me in my career was 1995. I got paired with Bill Raftery on New Jersey Nets games. And Bill was so open, and his personality burst through the screen. He was not doing an act of what he thought an analyst should be like. He was not doing a put on type of personality. It was genuine. It was him. And that was a big teaching moment for me. Nothing that he said to me, be this or do that or act that way, just noticing how he approached the job. Be yourself and trust yourself. And that's a big part of it too. So I think once my partner recognizes that I'm going to do everything in my power to make them look good, and not just them, to make us look good. That's the other part of the equation. I realized pretty early on, most people that watch a sporting event or listen to a sporting event, they don't categorize. They don't instantaneously say, I like him, I don't like him. They usually say, well, I like those guys, or I like the two of them. I like them. It's a team. Yeah. And once you get to that point mentally that you realize, hey, we're in this thing together, I think the analyst can latch on to the idea that the trust level is going to be very high. I'm never going to make them look bad. And if anything, I'm going to try to humanize them over the 2.5 to 3 hours that we're on the air together.
I think something about you, what makes you so great at what you do in play-by-play announcing, is, like you mentioned before, you are yourself. You're comedic. You can tell you love your job. You're entertaining. You always have high energy. When there's big plays going on, you make it more interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's others out there when I just want to hit the mute button, but not for you.
Thanks, what's something? I appreciate it. That's the ultimate compliment. Trust me. Yeah. Like the mute button, that's all the power in the world that a viewer has in their fingertips. Like, nah, it's not working for me. Yeah, done. Yeah. Mute. You're off.
What's something that you think separates you from everyone else in play-by-play announcing?
I think at some point in my career, I realized that I could allow my filter to disintegrate a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I could really say what I was thinking in the moment. I was a little gun shy when I was younger because I was really young when I got the job. And I desperately wanted to be credible. I didn't want someone to watch and see our open and see a young guy. And I was 25 and I looked 17. No joke. I mean, someone sent me a picture the other day and I couldn't believe it. It was a picture of me and Bill Raftery in our first year together. And truly, Max, it looked like my father hired Bill Raftery to make an appearance at my bar mitzvah. That's what it looked like. And I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that anyone was going to take me seriously. I have the picture in my phone. It's insane. It truly is insane. So I think I was so hell bent at that point of making sure that I was taken seriously, that I knew what I was talking about. And I think I wanted to show every game that I did my homework, and I probably went overboard with more minutia and factoids that were necessary. And I learned over the years, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Pick and choose the things that truly matter. Don't just throw something in to fill time, only if it truly pertains to what's happening on the court or on the field. And because of Bill Raftery, I allowed some of the walls to fall down.
Yeah.
And now, look, I'm not saying that I push the envelope with things that are borderline, but I just know that I'm willing to go places based on my personality and based on how I synthesize information. I'm willing to go places on games that maybe some others aren't willing to go, and rightfully so. It's got to be a part of who you are. If you're trying to be something that you're not, people will sniff it out. People sniff that out in a hurry. If you're playing a character, they sniff it out.
Oh, yeah.
So it is genuine. It is authentic. If you know me off the air, you know that I'm going to bust chops. You know that I'm self-deprecating. You know that there are going to be one-liners. There's going to be interesting assessments and observations of life. And I'm cool with bringing that on the air. I think I can pick and choose my spots. I know when to do it. I know when not to. And I'm not trying to do an amateur hour at the Chuckle Hut.
Yeah.
I realize there's a time and a place. And when the moment calls for honest to goodness play-by-play and the information has to be given to the viewer or listener, I'm there to provide it. But when there's a moment where you can bring some levity and it can be a little lighter, certainly over the course of an 82 game season, I think there's a place for that too.
What do you think was the most important game of your career that you called? I've read online that the 2010 TNT NBA, you did 2 NBA games that really gave you that promotion to do more national basketball games that were nationally televised.
Yeah, you know, Max, I've never really put it in any kind of category like that. Every game, I know this is going to sound really cliche, but it's so true. And if you knew me, you'd know that I'm speaking from the heart. I truly treat every game like it's important. It doesn't matter if it's Nets and Kings on a random Tuesday night. To me, that game is important. There's going to be somebody watching the game that doesn't know me, that's never heard of me, that's going to form an opinion for the very first time. And I think that mindset has served me well. I don't take anything for granted. I don't take for granted that the audience knows who I am or what my style is or my energy level. I get judged on my last broadcast. That's how I view it. And from the outside looking in, I'm sure there are plenty of people that would hear this and say, I don't know. I don't buy it. I'm telling you, and anyone that works with me would tell you the same thing, I hope. I just take every assignment seriously, and it matters to me. It matters to me that someone within management from the station that I'm working for has trusted me with that airtime that night. So yeah, those were probably important looking back on it, but I've had other games that I knew going in were important for my career that I had to do well. I just feel like every game that I work, I have to do well.
Yeah.
And that standard has served me well. I just haven't changed much over all these years of doing play-by-play. I still feel the need and the requirement in many ways to prove that I belong in a good way, not in a bad way. It's not a chip on my shoulder. It's really just more, I take every game and assignment with the importance that it matters to somebody. There's someone's parents out there, someone's uncle, someone's girlfriend, whoever it might be. There's somebody watching that it matters to. And I I don't want to let them down. As
Yeah, you never do though.
Cliche as that might sound, I really don't. I really think that way in the NCAA tournament, Max, more than anything else. When people ask me what's your toughest assignment, the NCAA tournament is by far the toughest assignment I have. It's a fire drill. You get your assignment on Selection Sunday, and now you're cramming information into your brain on 8 teams potentially you've never seen. And some of the teams, you didn't even know their nickname until you got the assignment. That's how out there some of your assignments could be. But the thing that has always stuck with me is that this is the height of most of these players' athletic career. Most of them are not playing in the NBA or not playing professionally overseas. This is it. And that kid's parents or brothers and sisters or cousins or godparents, whoever it might be, they're watching the game. And it's the mountaintop for this young person and young athlete. And I just always think to myself, I never want to get the information wrong. I don't want to butcher their name. I don't want to butcher the name of their hometown. I don't want to give erroneous information. It's really important to me to be accurate, to bring energy, and to treat it with the importance that it deserves. You know, for years, we're in a new world now, but I always visualized that going back to 1998, the first year that I did the tournament, that somebody was taping it on their VCR, and then they would take the tape and put it away and play it for the players' kids 25 years from now. Like, hey, want to see your dad in the NCAA tournament? And I want to make sure that when they put the game on, now we're in a different world. You can just call it up on YouTube, whatever it might be. You put the game on, that you're going to get a really good call of that one game, which may not have felt like the biggest deal to a play-by-play announcer, but it was certainly the biggest deal to that young athlete and to his life and his legacy.
That's a great mindset to have, is that you care. You care, like you said, when a college player pulls their tape out, you want to see dad play, and 20, 30 years later, they hear their name and it's pronounced correctly. Because a lot of times there's announcers that they butcher the names, as you said.
Max, that might be the first step of preparation. When someone asks you, well, how do you prepare? How do you attack this? Mm-hmm. The first thing, truly, is pronunciations of names.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of a certain team and you've watched that team the entire season, and now a broadcaster parachutes in to work the game, and they butcher the name of a player on that team, instantly you know that the broadcaster doesn't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Instantly. 2 seconds, that's all it takes to learn the name correctly and to write it down phonetically. Maybe this is a personal hang-up because people have butchered my name for my entire life. They think it's Ian, and I have no problem with it. I don't take it personally. I understand that's been the more acceptable pronunciation. But my parents didn't name me Ian. They named me after my father's mother, who was Ida, and they were trying to come up with an I name, and either it was going to be Ivan or Ira, or what they eventually came to was Ian, I-A-N. And the simple fact that I tell people when they say, well, I don't get it. I was like, well, do you know anyone named Brian? They're like, yeah, of course. So, well, take off the BR. What do you got? Oh, yeah, Ian. So people have been butchering that forever. Maybe there's this deep-seated thing inside of me that just wants to make sure that I'm not going to screw up somebody's name.
Yeah. And that's important that you take that seriously. The calls that you've done over your career, the Ray Allen game in 2013, that was a big one. Game 6, hits that 3-pointer right in the corner.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting about that? The current model that we're in, calling games remotely, and we have to because of the pandemic. There's just not a lot of travel. I did travel for the NFL season, NBA, no travel, calling games from a New York studio, or when the Nets are on the road, I'm calling them from Brooklyn. So that game that you just alluded to, that game was a remote call. I was in Secaucus, New Jersey, calling it off a monitor for the NBA Finals. international feed. And little did we know at that point. And that's why when all of this started happening and we started to come back from the quarantine and sporting events began trickling in again, a big question that I would get from people is, are you going to be able to do this? Can you call games off a screen? And, I don't expect people to know or begin to understand, but I had done it. I'd done it for not just that, for other events, tennis events and golf events, other basketball events, World Basketball Championships. So I wasn't intimidated by the idea of it. I think a lot of play-by-play announcers were, because it was just the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. But that particular series, I called that entire series off a large screen from Secaucus.
A play that I love that you called was the Miami Miracle. As being a Jet fan, I wanted Miami to beat the Patriots in the worst way. When Kenyon Drake takes that ball and runs right past Gronkowski, it was something to see. Yeah,
Max, the thing that sticks out to me for that, and it was something that will never happen again in my life. I was working with Dan Fouts, longtime partner of mine. We spent 10 years together.
Close for the Chargers.
Yeah, I love the guy. Like, really one of my favorite people in the world. He had a tight flight getting out of the Fort Lauderdale area, basically. He was flying out of Fort Lauderdale. And I knew he had a tight flight. So that final play comes to fruition. I had taken my notes and put them in my bag. Why? I thought I was going to save time somehow and help Dan so we could get out of there quicker. And the play happens. All of my notes are in my bag. And I just think it's going to be a perfunctory lateral. Big guy ends up with a football, doesn't know what to do with it, gets tackled, game over. It wasn't. It ended up being one of the most memorable plays that we've seen in recent years. And that was genuine shock and excitement when Drake crosses the goal line and the Dolphins beat the Patriots that particular day. That was pretty wild and very memorable at that.
Another lateral play was the Steelers when Antonio Brown actually ran it in against the Dolphins.
Dude, you have an excellent memory. Like that. That one, he stepped out of bounds, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Yeah. But it was ridiculous, ridiculous play. I remember a lot of ridiculous Antonio Brown plays. I ended up calling a bunch of Steelers games over his time there. He kicked the opposing punter. Look that up on YouTube. Like, just it's wild that's what entered his mind in that moment on a punt return, that he kicked the opposing punter. I think they were playing Cincinnati, if I remember correctly. He's always had a flair for the dramatic. He's a really gifted player. It's been a strange couple of years with him.
Yeah, you've heard the accusations and things going on, and he's got his issues, but he's finally got his ring, Antonio Brown, with the Buccaneers. And it was sad to see Brady win another ring. I still can't root for him, even though he's with a different team. All the years he just killed the Jets, but you can't forget that divisional game when Sanchez went in there and gave it to him.
You're right.
You can't. Something that's interesting, when you had your show, you work for Sirius too, with Phil Jackson. How did you build a rapport with Phil Jackson?
Yeah, it was a season with him. We were never in the same studio together. He was always doing it remotely. And we were always catching him after practice, before practice, right off the bus. And Phil, I recognized pretty early, didn't always want to talk basketball. He wanted to go off the beaten path. And he looked at life in a very different manner. We had it was a 1 hour show. We had one show that I recall. I still have no idea how we got on the topic, but he did about 30 minutes on canned goods. How? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm still not sure how we filled the time. It was a lot of me nodding and agreeing and trying to figure out follow-up questions. So Phil has a very interesting perspective on life and basketball and how those two worlds mesh. He's just a really unique guy. And I just did my best to ask questions that I thought people would be interested in. There were days where he was highly engaging, and there were days if the Lakers hadn't played as well, or if they were on the back end of 4 games in 5 nights, that Phil had other stuff going on in his life, and you'd look at the clock and go, we still got 17 more minutes here. But I enjoyed it. I've just found him to be an insightful guy and highly knowledgeable and very professorial in his approach.
What's the major goal for your career that you haven't achieved yet? Is it calling a Super Bowl? What's that major goal for you?
Yeah, Max, I get that question occasionally. I don't know if there's one specific thing. I feel like I want to just keep doing what I'm doing, and calling big sporting events will create some memorable moments. You just can't predict. You don't wake up the morning of an event and say that this is the one that's going to change me. This is the one that's going to change my career or bring me more notoriety. I don't view it that way. I think things happen the way they happen. I don't try to plan. I don't try to forecast. I truly try to make the most out of every game that I'm doing, try to enjoy my partner and create chemistry and create some real honest to goodness dialogue and back and forth. And then if the game happens to be good, then you got to be ready to deliver in the moment. Mark Jackson and I, St. John's great, did games together on the Yes Network for a number of years. And one of the classic net games was Nets and the Phoenix Suns played a marathon at the Meadowlands. And it was Steve Nash dueling with Jason Kidd. And they were going back and forth. And it really felt like whoever got the ball last was going to win the game. It was one of those kind of games. I think the final was 153 to 150, whatever it might have been. Yeah. And Mark and I, who just had a genuine chemistry with one another and regard, we just liked being in one another's company. We made each other laugh. There was a mutual respect. We had 7 or 8 things. We never talked about what we're going to do on the air or discussed potential bits. Everything that happened organically. We had 7 or 8 things in the first half of that game. Any one of those things, you would have said, oh, that's hilarious. How did you guys even go there? And yet when the game got to the point where it was really at a high level, we shifted gears. Yeah. And it became one of the most exciting broadcasts I've ever been a part of. And it just shows you the duality of this job. You just don't know.
Yeah.
Times that you go in expecting this is going to be the best game of the year, and it's a dud. And then other games where you're not expecting much, you think, no one's really going to care. And all of a sudden the whole country is completely entrenched in your game. That's why, going back to our original conversation about it, if you approach things the same way consistently, if you bring the same attitude and the same dedication to the job, then you're never going to be surprised or dealing with a curveball, because you're just doing what you do. And that's really been a big part of my mentality.
How proud are you of your son following in your footsteps and making his own path in broadcasting?
Yeah, Max, the thing that strikes me, no matter what I achieve in my career, it pales in comparison to the pride I feel for what he's doing. When it's your kid, you can't even compare. You can't compare the emotion. You can't compare the sense of satisfaction or achievement. When it's you, you're living it.
Yeah.
When it's your child, you're living vicariously, and you don't have the same kind of power to make it happen. They got to make it happen. So what Noah's done in a short period of time has been really impressive. And I think more than anything else, he's just a good guy.
Yeah.
He gets it. Just a really likable person. He puts good into the world. He's not someone that takes any of this for granted. And that's probably what's led to whatever success he's achieved in a short period of time. He just brings the right vibe to whatever it is he does.
I think he definitely takes after you, of course, with the broadcasting, but what you said, just sticking to the grind and following true to yourself and not taking anything for granted.
Yeah. And the last thing I would leave you with, Max, as well, is how you treat people.
Yeah.
That's really an important part of this equation, what you put in, and not doing it with an agenda or for alternative reasons, doing it because it's the right thing to do. Treating people well, learning the names of the people on your crew. It doesn't take that much to refer to someone by their name, not pal or buddy or yo. Like, it doesn't take that much time. And something else I realized pretty early in my career, let's take a football game as an example. So there's a broadcast booth, and within that booth, there's you, there's your analyst, there's a stat person, there's a spotter, there's someone that's working the first down line, the yellow line, there's a stage manager, there's a cameraman, there's an audio person. So you have 8 or 9 people occupying that booth. When you step in the booth as the play-by-play announcer, you're setting the tone. If you're in a good mood, that creates a positive energy in the booth for the entire day. If you come into the booth with negative energy or in a bad mood and you let it spill over, people pick up on that, and it changes the whole dynamic of that booth. And it's not just a broadcast booth. It's any room you enter in life. When you enter, are people happy to see you, or are they looking away because they don't want to deal with it? And that says a lot. It says a lot about the person. And it's something I learned from my dad. My father just had a way with people. My father was a stand-up comedian. He was an actor. He was a trumpet player. He was a commercial actor. He was in movies, TV, you name it. He was an entertainer. And he just had this innate ability to make people feel better. And I saw it as a kid. He could put a smile on someone's face. He could change their day. And that was contagious in a good way. So that always stuck with me.
Is there anything else that you would love to tell the audience up here at St. John's University? Any important advice you'd love to give to the broadcasters and radio hosts?
Well, first of all, Lou Carnesecca is a gem and one of the nicest human beings I've ever dealt with in my life. As a kid, basically at Syracuse, approaching him for an interview and him saying yes, that can change you. That can make you feel so optimistic about the business that you're entering. So for St. John's in particular, that still sticks with me to this day. I was in college at the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden and approached Lou Carnesecca, and he said yes to a 5-minute interview. He could have said no.
Yeah.
He said yes. That same Big East tournament, I approached Bill Raftery, who also said yes. Mm-hmm. So think about that. That's 1990. I'm a senior in college. And then 5 years later, I'm sitting next to him and broadcasting Nets games. And instead of going in thinking, oh, Is this the guy that turned me down for the interview 5 years earlier or said, hey, I don't have time for you, kid? No, it was a guy who brought warmth and someone who radiated positivity. So when I entered that arena with Bill, there was a kinship, all because he said yes to a 21-year-old kid. Yeah, I mean, for your audience in general, I would just say, I know it's not easy, but to remind yourself, try to find something that you really love. And if you can make a living doing that, you're going to be really happy in your life. Waking up in the morning, excited about what you do, it permeates your household. Even though with my travel schedule, the way that it was, I missed a lot of events for my kids or family events for my wife, but they all supported me because they knew that I was genuinely happy in what I was doing. And I would bring that happiness with me back to our home. So the time that we spent together was always joyful time. It was always positive. It was never dad hates his job and he comes home in a miserable mood. It was the opposite. So it doesn't have to be broadcasting. Whatever it is, whatever your passion is, try to follow that. And I know it's not easy, but figure out a way to make that your life's work, and it's not going to feel like work.
No. What do they say? If you love your job, you never work a day in your life.
It's true. It's an adage, and it's 100% accurate.
Yep. Well said, Ian Eagle. I want to thank you so much for you coming on my show here for a long extended interview. And I think everyone enjoyed it. They learned a lot. The audience, especially the sports broadcasters up here, they definitely taking their notes right now, especially me, because I want to get to the radio field with being in college right now. Thank you for all the knowledge and everything that you let out here on the show here tonight. We'd love to have you back on for, of course, not an hour and a half, but 10 minutes in the future to talk about the Nets towards the end of the
Max. Yeah, we'll do it again down the road. Maybe come playoff time, when things are really getting hot and heavy, we'll revisit it.
Yeah. Ian Eagle, I want you to take care, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Max, thanks, man. Really nice to chat with you. Nice to meet you virtually. And again, Nets and Knicks, I feel like it's going in the right direction. So keep wearing the hat.
Yes. Thank you, Ian. Take care.
See you, bud. Be well.
Stay well.